Welcome back to the Fab Forums and part 2 on the mini tub build. So in the last episode, went in, marked out, cut out the mini tubs, and also went in here and C-notched this thing a little bit. In this episode, I'm gonna start filling a lot of these filler panels. So I've already cut some pieces and kind of got them bent up to kind of fill in those C-notches. I already actually got the other side tacked in. So I'm gonna tack this side in. I'm not gonna fully weld anything because I still gotta make some buckets for the shock mount and the spring perch. So just gonna kind of tack them in. Some of this may come back out as I cut it out, but just kind of want to go ahead and reinforce this frame and start putting these pieces back together. After probably a couple hours of cutting and grinding, got it pretty cleaned up. So I ended up cutting, I don't know, probably another ½ inch or close to an inch off of the pieces in the car that were basically attached to the frame rail itself. So there was an overhang here. Cut that off, went in here, ground it all down, cleaned everything up. Had to drill out a bunch of spot welds and knock those pieces off as well. So now, well, not quite yet, but I'll go in here and kind of weld all this up when I'm ready. You can see here all the pieces that I cut off. I just drilled out the spot welds and then knocked those pieces off. So now everything's squared up, cleaned up. I do have to started coming in here and kind of cleaning up this stuff here. I'll have to clean up that throughout the entire tub itself, just so I can go back in there and weld it. Same thing with the top of this. I also plan to kind of pull this sheet metal down and kind of tack it all in too, so it's nice and tight. Now that all that is done, I basically got to do the same thing to this piece here. So I'll go in here and take out probably another 3/4 of an inch, clean all that up, get it ready to weld in. Once I get it really close, I'll kind of set them in there, and then I can kind of mark some lines. That way everything meets up nice and clean. It'd be easy to go in there and kind of stitch weld it together. All right, we're making progress. This kind of project is one of those, just like just about every project, it's one of those deals that it's gonna feel pretty daunting and things are gonna look much worse before they get better. So just keep that in mind if you decide to take something like this on. And really that's any project. Just got to dig in, kind of start going at it, and then just work through it. It just takes time. So everything's cut and welded. So I went back in here and welded this seam up here. I left it kind of thick, so I'll have something to weld to later when I put the tubs back in. But everything's cleaned up. The C-notch is done. And then once I got all this done, I actually went in there and cut out another section, and that's going to be for the shock itself. So you can see on this side, I've got the filler piece there, and the actual frame rail has already been cut. So you can see how thin the sheet metal is on the top. Makes it a little bit difficult to weld, but the rest of the stuff's pretty thick. The only thing I may have to do, and I've kind of got it marked here, is I may have to like C-notch or notch this frame rail here this way, just for that spring to kind of sit in there out of the way. Allow me to tuck that spring back in there. I'll kind of show you why I made that little shock notch. It's actually the first time I've done that. I didn't do that on the Coupe. But I just feel like it would look more, you know, finished once it's done. So here's the tub as I cut it out. And I've went through and cleaned everything up, cleaned these lines up here, and then trimmed it through there. Now you can see the shock itself, the shock mount itself kind of hangs out. You can kind of see it's close here, further away over there. Well, that kind of mimics what I got going back here. Let's see if I can set this down. So let's see if I can hold this in place. So that's basically the 2 inches cut out, and then you can see it roughly fits over here. Obviously I got some trimming to do. And then that shock mount there needed a little relief cut in it. I don't know if you can see that or not. So the plans are basically finish that side as far as that shock mount piece goes, and then kind of put those tubs in there and see if I can figure out where that spring needs to be. Maybe remount that spring perch on the top. Once I get that done, I can kind of roughly tack these in place and start, you know, kind of filling in the voids of putting all this stuff back together. Let me show you where I'm at. So I talked about getting those notched and welded in. All that's done. Now I've made some plates to go over the top. So I showed you how thin this sheet metal was. Well, that shock mount needs to be very, very stable. So I made some plates to kind of go in there. Got them tacked in on this side. And tack this one in as well. Got a little weld through primer on there, just to kind of protect it. I plan on obviously cleaning all this up, but I want to clean that up, spray it, keep it from rusting in the future. I'm about 99% sure that I'm gonna put like a little 4-point cage in this thing, mainly to kind of stiffen up the rear a little bit. It'll have some subframe connectors to kind of tie everything together, but mainly kind of to stiffen up these shock mounts. So those back bars that come down and go, you know, through the trunk, this back trunk section, or I guess, what do they call that? Deck lid. The bars that go down through the deck lid, I will tie them into these shock mounts in some form or fashion just to kind of really stiffen everything up. But these plates will just add a little bit. And that, and the fact that I took a little bit of the frame rail away as well. So putting these plates in there will just kind of stiffen that little thinner section back up a little bit. All right, so everything's in, got my plate in, and then I've got the remainder of the tub just slightly tacked right here just to hold it. And I'm just checking what my gap is. So about 2 inches back here, and I think it grows to about 2 1/4 inches up front. Hopefully you guys can see this, but so in here you can see my shock. So the shock goes right up in here, and you can see where I've cut this out. So now it fits nice and smooth. Everything looks pretty good. So I think at this point what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of tack it to hold it, and then I'll start kind of working front to back. Some of this stuff's gonna have to be massaged and cleaned up, and then after the fact I will go in here and figure out my spring mount, spring perch, because it fits between this piece and the frame rail, and obviously now there's not enough room because it's a good bit smaller. All right, let's take a second and talk springs. So typically, the spring perch sits right in here. You can see I've got the factory one. So, you know, it used to sit something like that. Now you can see there's not enough room. So in the past, what I've done is come in here and basically cut this section of the frame rail out and kind of do like a, you know, a little concave section in there, and then basically trim this up, stick it back in there, and then the spring, even though the top of the spring kind of leans in a little bit, everything works properly. But I'm starting to think maybe going with a coilover style spring may be a better option, because it already fits pretty close. So I just have to make a spring perch for this thing, and they work perfectly on the bottom as far as the lower control arm. I just make a little perch, kind of stick it right up in there. Obviously this is the wrong size and tension of spring that I need, but the good thing is that I could have a bunch of these things because they're pretty affordable. So I can have several different options to use on the rear and the front, depending on what I'm doing. This particular one here is a 14-inch 150, which is more of like a drag style spring for the front. Everything's tacked in, so you can see, or maybe you can't, but there's still like a little bit of gap in there. I tried to, you know, basically minimize any gaps that I could to the best of my ability, but it's inevitable you're not going to get them all. But I got a little trick I'm going to show you. So there's two things you can do really. You can go in here and just butt weld all this and kind of clean it up, grind it flush, and then a little body filler right over it. Not body filler, seam sealer right over it. Just kind of gives it that factory look. You'd never see it. Or you could plate it, so you could come in here with like a, you know, 1-inch strip and weld both sides of it. That would work. It'd actually be stronger than just butt welding it. But if you're gonna butt weld, let's take a look at the inside here. So there's your basically 2 inches everywhere. So I think it gets a little wider at the front on both sides, maybe like 2 1/4. And I think it has more to do with not how much I took out of it, but how I've kind of tacked it in there. It kind of flared this out. There's a couple issues you run into. This body panel has like a step in it right here. And when you know, you got to cut the step out. And so to get them back together, you kind of have to like push it down in there to kind of get it to form, which does give you a little space out here. Although, you know, when you go back and put your filler strip in, you can kind of manipulate it however you want. So as you can see, both sides got some pretty big gaps in here. And one of the tools I like to use is this bad boy right here. It's a little bit dirty, but it's just a magnet base with like this spring on it, and has a copper pad on the end. I've done a Friday Fool video on this thing a long time ago, but in the most basic terms, you just take this thing, you just stick it to the body. Well, gotta find a nice clean spot to stick it to. And then once you stick it, just kind of position that pad, a copper pad, over the gap, and then you can weld that gap shut from the bottom side. And when you're done, the copper pad will just pop loose. So copper won't weld. That's why I wouldn't stick. It's got all kinds of shavings on it. Anyway, copper won't weld the steel. So it's almost like a non-stick pan. It'll kind of just pop loose when you're done, and you just kind of come over here and clean up the back side of this weld, the other side of it, and good to go. Especially like spots like this that used to be a bracket or something. There's a big hole there. I'll have to fill all those, and I'll just use something like this. So, you know, I'd mentioned doing a project like this. The way that this car sits right now is perfect for something like this. And this is why, like, if you had a nice clean car, I mean, it's gonna be a mess. First of all, you have to take everything out of it. And I mean, you just get stuff everywhere. I mean, look at my pile. I've swept, I don't know, 7, 8 times. I got a pile there. Got a pile over here of grinding dust. And so, like, if you're gonna do something like this, and you have a car, well, if you have a car like this, and you ever want to do something like this, that's the time to do it. Don't wait till you get it painted and do all the stuff and then go back, because it's just gonna be that much bigger of a chore. There you go, mini tub. 2-inch mini tub on the Coupe. Oh, let me show you. Let's slide a tire back up under this thing, or a wheel. Let's slide a wheel back up under this thing. So in the first video, basically the last video that posted, I kind of talked about why I wanted to do this, and it was to kind of set a tire in properly. So let's get the same wheel, and we'll stick it back up in there, and we'll kind of see what we got. If you didn't see the first video, this little part may not make much sense to you, but yeah, it's a huge difference. I already kind of checked it out, so let's take a look. So in the first video, this is a 10.5-inch wide rear wheel. And to get one of these things to fit on a Fox, typically they're going to be, the wheel itself will be flush with the car, or maybe, I don't even think you can inset them. You can go with like a 10-inch wide wheel, and you can get it close, but it's right out here on the edge. A lot of guys will roll this or cut this inner piece off. And what I like is I like to set these things in some. So before, to get it to sit in like this, it was basically touching the inner fender well. Well, now look, that's touching now. So that's like a 2 or 3 inch gap. So I can move it out about like that. Get that nice tuck under this thing, but still have plenty of room on the inside for, you know, no rub issues. If I ever do want to take this to drag strip or something, I could fit like a big, you know, 28 by 10 and a half or something under here with no issues. So yeah, big difference, tons of room. I'll kind of dial this in with the rear end. I'll narrow the rear end to kind of get the back spacing I want. Perfect. What's cool though is these wheels, or this wheel size is typically what you'd see like in the new age cars, the 03, 04 Cobras and those style cars. Usually it's like a 9-inch front, 10.5 inch rear, 5 on a 4.5 lug pattern, and you can get them anywhere. You can get all kinds of different styles, whereas for the Foxbodies, you can't really get staggered setups like that because they just won't fit. So there you go. Mini tub on the Foxbody. Hope y'all dig that. Man, I've been kind of struggling here lately. I've had a bum knee and it's tough to kind of crawling out of these cars and stuff when you're hurting. But there you go, mini tub. So the next video, may not be tomorrow, but the next video, I'll go in here, put these fillers in, kind of finish weld everything, clean it up real good, seal it, and we'll paint it and make it look like it never happened. We'll make it look like it came from the factory like that. Anyways, as always, thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Go do work, son.